We thought that we would take a couple of minutes just to share with you where those personas have come from, because sometimes, I guess are you all familiar with what persona is when you use it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Is there anyone who hasn't done persona development?
Right. So where this is coming from is an EU-funded project that Marcus is leading. This is now alphabetical order. So Marcus is leading the project.
So
He's
at the bottom, yeah.
his name begins with W, so I'm next to the bottom. Lorraine, as usual, is first.
Yeah.
There's a team that's been working for a year on this Graffolution project. Marcus can tell you a lot more about it in detail. If you're interested, then talk about it. But the aim of the project is to reduce the economic, social and cultural costs of cops, so basically arrests in the judicial system, or cleaning linked to what is perceived by many as graffiti vandalism, but perceived by many as others as a pro-social activity that's linked to regeneration. Think about Leek Street and the stuff that went on over to the other side of the South Bank. So that's what the project's about in terms of research terms. It's investigating the different perspectives and the law and the different responses that people take into graffiti in different European cities. The concept is that all of this research might lead to a digital platform that's in two halves. One half of the platform is a community, an agonistic space for all of these different social actors to come together, share their different perspectives, and on the other side of the platform, it's about creating a set of resources that people can use to either promote pro-social, arts-led activities, graffiti activities, or if you're a train company that's got people climbing into your yard and tagging your trains, then there's stuff you can do there to try and stop them climbing into your yard and tagging your trains. So it's trying to be balanced in terms of both sides of the argument. But these are some of the involved actors and beneficiaries. So one of the first things we're doing in the project is a bit of stakeholder mapping within that sort of scoping stage to find out who's involved. Some of the people involved are here, but what we also understand is that just because you're a policeman doesn't mean that all policemen are the same and all have the same perspectives on something. So if we're trying to make recommendations and if we're trying to give a set of resources that you as a practitioner might approach and then say, okay, which of these things is going to work for me, then it's important to know, not just from a case study, who's involved, you need to be working with the police, you need to be working with a train company, but what sort of police or train company you need to be working with. Because you might have friendly police that view graffiti as a process activity, or other police that absolutely aren't viewing it in that way at all. And so we need to be able to have some nuance around the different actors that are involved. So the process that has gone through, and this links to other parts of a bigger project. So there's a set of interviews conducted. Our team, Lorraine and the guys, conducted a set of interviews in the UK with these different types of actor. Images here from the Passner demonstrate the numbers that we interviewed in each of the cases. There are also similar interviews conducted in other cities in the UK with similar representation across, other cities in Europe with similar representation across the other actor groups.
Just make a sort of announcement because I forgot to do it. Passner, who you met earlier, has been working with us. She's from your course. She's done the graphics and she's helped us map it. She's amazing. So you just want to say that.
What happens next is all of the transcripts from those interviews go into a piece of coding software, which in this instance is Atlas TI, and according to a list of interests or considerations that we're trying to see if I can find that for you. According to a list of So according to a list of considerations that we were trying to a bit tricky to talk between these. Sorry, I can't see what's at the top of the page, you might notice, which is a little bit tricky. Okay, I'll just give you a general idea. So a master code list, you've got a transcript of an interview with all these different kinds of actor. So some police, some train company operators. We look through the text of that interview, and these are some of the things that we're interested in. We're interested in understanding how do these people define graffiti? What does graffiti mean to them? What's their current relationship to graffiti? What's their relationship to, what's their sort of pathway into graffiti? Have they got any stories to tell you around that? How long have they been involved in this area? Then their experiences and their motivations, key issues that they comment on around viewing graffiti as a problem, key issues they comment on around viewing graffiti as an opportunity. So what you will do is, it's quite subjective, but you read through the text. These guys have done a lot of it, Gamzee's done a lot of it. You read through the text, and depending on your interpretation of what's being said there, you pick up that piece of text and you locate it against the relevant category. And there are a lot of these categories in this particular project. So, am I going to be able to spell for it? I can't spell for it.
So this ethnographic method, which you could use in your dissertations, which is qualitative research, it gives it a sort of robustness if you have many interviews and then you code them so that when you make your generalisations, about the world, that it's based on a very specific approach. And so
the thing with personas is, the reason we use personas is because we know that everyone's not the same, but we also know that we can't do bespoke for every single person. So personas is the way that we try and get in between the two. Not everyone's the same, but actually let's try and group them so that we can be as specific as we're able to be in the context we're operating in. So these are some of the things that we were looking for in this project. Comments around the legality, their perception on legality, comments around the perception on impact, comments around the networks they're involved with, what they consider to be sort of opportunities of future approaches, what their personal background is, for the standard sort of demographic information, what their perception of graffiti writers is, and so on and so forth. So that information is, I'm not going to show you these in the future because I can't get them out. How do I get rid of that?
you can't see the thing on the screen there. It's just that.
Pardon?
Just
Yeah, like this. Yeah. Anyway, okay. So that's the first. But that's the interviews. They get coded. Do you understand how the coding works now? Basically, you go through, you tag the bits of content, and those bits of content gather. You do that for every one of those within an actor group. And so what you end up with is, for each actor group, so there might be 10 graffiti writers, for example. You look at all of those perspectives, and from the things they say, you pick up the things they say, and you chuck it into one of those different areas. Then you end up with several different lists of these different people that have said stuff around this, and around that, and around that. When you look across that list, you're able to identify, according to where most of the sort of areas are filled out, you could go, oh, actually, looking at those, they're pretty similar. Now, most of the same fields are populated, and then when you go in and read those fields in more detail, you go, actually, that's right, they are saying similar things. If they're saying similar things, then we aggregate that into one persona type. If they're saying different things, and you'd actually say, look, do you know what? This train operator is saying many different things to that train operator. Their emphasis is in many different places, and when you drill down into what it is they're actually saying, their perspective is very different to each other. So that would give us a different persona type. So you've got an actor type for a train operator. By looking across all of the things that these train operators have said in their interviews, you aggregate their responses, and from that aggregation, you then get persona types. So from 20 different train operators you've spoken to, you might end up with 2 or 3 different types of train operator. But you're not just making it up on what you think, you're actually evidencing it according to what they've said at different points of communication in the interview.
One of the useful things that came out from this process that I didn't really anticipate was that some of the personas ended up crossing, so where we've been quite reliant on a number of actor groupings that we've defined within this project, so like police and law enforcement, transport, like authorities, graffiti writers, social and cultural representatives, so on and so on. We've been quite reliant on those titles or categories, and through this process, some of the personas showed that they actually cross one or two categories at least. And that's sort of showing the reality of it, where, you know, people don't like to be pigeonholed in boxes because they're not, you know, a given, they don't always fit a given title or a given category. And the useful thing about a persona is it gives enough detail or enough granularity that you can get a picture of someone who crosses more than one field or more than one box. So it could be they're related to a transport organisation, but actually they also work in policing, or they're related to
They're like
cultural,
graffiti, but they're a police
but they're
officer.
also and that's useful to help understand the bigger picture in a more real way.
So that's what we were just talking about in terms of the coding. That's what it actually looks like. Start pulling the text into different areas. These guys have got lots to say. They're quite similar in terms of the areas that they're talking about. Then you drill into that, read what they're actually saying. If they're expressing similar opinions in those areas, you might say that they could be represented, they could combine to be the same person. This one's talking about some things but not others. Actually, let's have a look at that. If actually if their focus and their emphasis is on certain areas that are not common with the others, they might generate a separate persona identity.
And that's the difference between a stereotype. Because if I was to start talking about a happy hipster, and then I worked it out on this, that, you know, I might find that my definition of happy hipster needed to be improved, you know, because they would be broader than my stereotype had allowed.
And then you start to try to work those characteristics together into what we're calling the persona sheets. So what's happening there is you're getting the...
And if you hit the green dot, it should just fit to the page.
You might be able to get rid of it. Oh, nice and modern. So then on these ones, what we're doing now is we're going into each of those squares that were similar to each other and trying to find a narrative that brings together the squares. So if there's a number, if there are those three different personas that we said are very similar to each other, but they're each expressing the same opinion in a slightly different way, we would try and aggregate those opinions and find a narrative that makes it the one voice for that persona, combining the many voices of the similar personas. Yep? And that's what's going into this character sheet. So actually, I think you got sent these, did you not? For your personas, you got the character sheet. So that's the one that gives you actually quite a lot of really nuanced detail around their approaches to the practice, what attracts them to it, what puts them off, gaps that they could be covering, and so on. So that's how that bit comes about. So they're not specific, they're not always the real words of people, but sometimes they are, but they're aggregated in that way. Then the personas are visualised. So from those sheets, we then create From those sheets, we then create those visualised sheets that you've seen here, these big persona sheets, which basically is a way of getting smart quick about some of the key things that are listed in the characterisation sheet, so that people can access it easily, see what's most important, and see who we're talking about. Yeah, that's pretty much the process of creating the personas. And then where we're using those is on this website. If you approach it, there's a framework we're using, one part of which is who's involved. And in the who's involved bit, if you were a person who wanted to engage in some project, then you would go to this and you would say who's involved, and you would say, right, I'm working with a school, I'm working with some police, and I'm working with a train operating company, and it's like, what sort of police? What are the teachers like? You know, are they interested in this sort of approach, that sort of approach? So actually, you can start to quite quickly be more nuanced about the interventions that might be appropriate in that situation. Because one of the things that we all know from all the work that we've done is that case studies aren't that transferable because contexts vary a great deal. So you've got a case study, oh, that's great, I do that where I am. And try and get you to do it where you are. It doesn't work out in the same way because actually that case studies don't give you the nuance around what's going to work out in that particular context you're operating in. So that's what that bit's about.